Okay, the first thing that we want to talk about is planning and goals. What exactly are you wanting to achieve? Self-sufficiency? You want to just provide for yourself? Are you wanting to have a supplemental income from this? Is it wanting to be a full-time business? Is it something that you want to pursue full-time? Now, this can be decided on down the road if you want to start small at the, say, self-sufficiency-ish type line. You can start there and you can always grow. There's nothing to stop you from growing other than the size of land that you have. But if you grow to a point where you're able to provide for yourself a supplemental income or a full-time business, you might actually want to use this to buy more land to expand. So there's something to think about there. And you also think about what you have right now. What resources and what do you have right now? Land, skills, time, budget. I know not everybody has any of those too. You may say, I don't have any land, I don't really know how to do anything, and I don't really have the time to do a whole lot. And you don't have a lot of money. And that, honestly, is where I started at the very beginning with mine either. I didn't really have a whole lot of money. I was pretty deep in debt at the beginning of it, and I tried to just work my way out with different things to do different things like that. So we'll talk about a little bit of each one of those, land and skills, time and budget. And honestly, through a lot of these courses, I'm going to put some skill courses together to kind of show you how to do some planning and basic building some raised beds and building flower beds, irrigation. We'll go over a bunch of different things like that, so you'll have information for those things. And you want to set realistic goals. Start small and scale up. There's nothing wrong with starting small because you can always scale up. But if you start too big, it gets out of hand, and then it's difficult sometimes to scale down per se. So I would recommend starting out small because you can always add to it a lot easier. Because if you start small and you find a really good process that works well for you, then working up and scaling up is super simple from there because you just replicate what you've already done. But like I said, we'll cover a lot of that. These are just general overview points. And, implementing these things, write down specific goals. You want to grow 50% of your food that you have to eat on your table. Or you want to raise chickens for eggs and sell 20% of your produce. Whatever that may be. You want to set a specific goal for what you're wanting to accomplish. And to start right now, you need to really, at first, I would start researching all of your local regulations, like your local zoning laws, land restrictions, required permits. Some places in the city you aren't allowed to have chickens. I know where my parents live, you can have chickens, but you can't have a rooster. And I think that's mainly just a noise nuisance thing, but you just can't have a rooster. And I believe you can have 2 chickens per person in the household. But there's different laws for different places, so I would make sure that you really research that before you start doing anything, because you don't want to do anything illegal or that you're going to have to put work into and then tear right back down. And also create a budget. Create a budget. If you want to start out and start going kind of big, planning out, say, hey, this is really what I want to do. Start a budget, include land, seeds, animals, and infrastructure. Include all of those things in your budget because you want to have enough money to buy land if you want to, or honestly, some people rent land. That's not an unheard of thing. Especially if I know a lot of people that have cows, they will rent big fields to put their cows in to be able to maintain them as far as grass goes. So that's something to look at too, and start with a small pilot project. Get down real specific into what you want to do and find one thing and start with that and get that down really good to see if this is something that you want to do. Let's talk a little bit about land and infrastructure. First thing is choosing land. Say this is what you want to do, you want to choose land, that's fine. And if you don't want to start with land, you can skip over this part of the video. I just kind of want to touch on each little thing in order, just so you have an idea of the totality of everything and the whole big picture. So with land, the biggest thing at choosing it, you want to make sure good climate, That may be in your area. I'll be honest with you, I know some people that move to Homestead. That may not be you, and if it's not, it's fine, no problem. But take into account what your climate is before you start doing this, because there may be restrictions on things that you can't grow. Also, soil fertility, access to water, and proximity to markets. If you're wanting to do this as a business, if you can find something or have something that's closer to a market, that's great, because you don't have to work out as much logistics. You can actually have short distances to travel to market to take your produce to be able to sell it. And that's going to be a big thing, like if that's where you're wanting to expand to. Soil fertility and access to water, being able to get water is not as much of an issue as it would be possibly outside of the United States. Now, there's still some areas that don't have water, and there's ways you can get around that, and ways you can bypass that. But we'll talk a lot about that and everything. But for instance, with your climate, there's certain types of hay. I'm in Alabama. There's certain types of hay that it's just difficult to grow here, whereas out in Texas or a little bit warmer, consistent climates, it's a little bit easier to grow other types of grass. So we have to take that into mind also. And check out infrastructure needs, your fencing, greenhouses, barns, coops, irrigation, whatever you want to do. There's a different things that you would have to take into account for, say, greenhouses, barns, chicken coops. Can you have those in your area? Are there zoning restrictions? Are there building permits that you would have to get? Things like that. You have to make sure and know too. You're going to want to know property lines if you don't have fencing up, because you don't want to put a fence on your neighbor's property and then have all kinds of issues outside of that. Plus cost versus doing it yourself. Now, there's a lot of prefabricated barns and things out there. There's nothing wrong with buying something prefabricated. There really is not. If that's what you need to do, hey, go for it. Fantastic. But I will say, if you do, please go through and look at the barn, because I cannot tell you how many times I have seen these prefabricated barns, buildings, and you go in there and I can shake the entire structure by hand. You want to make sure this is very well built, and if it is not well built, you want to make sure you can get it for enough of a cost discount or cheap enough, and make sure that you can actually improve it yourself, because you may find a situation where you can get some of these barns that are not built very well to begin with, and you get it cheap enough and are able to reinforce it and make it your own and make it strong enough for what you need, cheaper than you could buy the original well-built structure, because you're going to modify things. You're going to change what you grow, how you grow, the amount you grow. You're going to change a bunch of different things about these buildings. So you just want to make sure that it's well-built, and if it's not well-built, you want to make sure that you can reinforce it, or have someone that you know that's good at carpentry and things like that can reinforce it. So you have to keep those things in mind. Versus building your own structures. Building your own structures, there's nothing wrong with that. There's a bunch of information, and I'll teach you some basic things about building structures as well, just so you have an idea of what you would be up against if you're going to build one. So here's an example. Somebody in a dry climate installing a rainwater collection system to supplement their irrigation. That's fantastic if you're very dry. Now, also too, with rainwater, there's local things. Some places you actually cannot collect rainwater through your local municipalities, but you can look at your local sites and local government sites and things and find out if you can or cannot, because they will have those laws listed fairly plainly. So, or a small farmer builds a pole barn using reclaimed wood to house goats. There's nothing wrong with that. There's, where I'm at in the South, you can find abandoned chicken houses and get old tin from chicken houses, pressure wash it, build really nice barns, and save a lot of money as far as tin and lumber and things like that go. Before you purchase any land, if that's the way you're going, you want to conduct a soil test before you purchase. Now, there are co-ops that we have here that we can basically get a sample of soil, take it to a place, and they will send it off, have it analyzed, and get you a report back for a price. Also, some universities that specialize in agronomy and soils, I believe it is, will actually be able to do these tests for you. I don't know pricing. Pricing is going to change from place to place. But I would call, if you have a university around you and you know that they have that type of a program, call them and ask them. The most they can do is say no or hang up on you or something. I don't know. But I would give them a call and just see if there's something that they could tell you, hey, yeah, we're able to do that, and it's free, or, it's $50 or whatever it may be. You're paid for the whatever chemicals they use to test it, whatever it is. But call them and find out so you're not left in the dark about your soil. Because if you have bad soil, it's really tough swapping things out and trying to get that soil back where you can plant it depending on what's in it. And map out too where you want your structures to be based on sunlight, wind direction, and drainage. You don't want to put a greenhouse in a heavily shaded wooded area and get very little sun. You want something that's going to get good sunlight, but also you want a barn to be roughly out of the wind as far as the opening goes, because you don't want the wind to be able to get into the barn, pick up, push the roof up. You want to have it where it's on like the side of the barn where it shears, or even the corner sometimes where there's more strength where it can kind of go over. And drainage. Honestly, there's areas that are flood zones. You need to kind of keep an eye on those things and make sure that you're not building in a flood zone. For instance, the house that I'm building right now is actually in a flood zone. Now, has it flooded in 100 years because the people that live around me have been living here? Their families have been living here that long? No, it has not. But I'm still right on the edge of a flood zone, so I've elevated my property. I'm keeping an eye on things. I'm making sure my creek that goes through my property is well cleaned out and well maintained. So there's different things that you can do. Just because you're in a flood zone does not mean it's completely unworkable. We'll talk about that as well. And invest in multi-use buildings, items, anything like that. You can also, for instance, you have a greenhouse that half of the back of it also serves as a storage shed. Or you have a storage shed that also serves as part workshop. The house I'm building right now, the front half is the house. The back half is a 2-car garage or my carpentry workshop. So there's different things you can do, and you can add lean-tos or a small, roof on the outside of a building to be able to park vehicles, tractors, or just put equipment under. So there's a lot of different things you have to keep in mind, especially when you're looking at land and infrastructure. And we'll go deeper into that too. Let's talk a little bit about soil and land management now. You want to understand your soil type and your fertility. There's certain things that won't grow in certain soils, certain pH levels that you need for certain plants. You really need to, like I say, find that pilot project and find something that you want to just nail down and do first, and then look and see what your soil requirements might be for that and see what you're going to need. Because you're also going to want to put organic matter and compost to improve your soil health, even if the soil is fine for growing what you want to grow. Because soil nutrients disappear as plants grow through them. They put some back, but they rob others. So you're going to want to have a way to compost or put organic matter in something in your garden or in your raised bed. Now, and there's some people that do no-till and regenerative farming practices. Again, there's nothing wrong with this. I know a lot of places that do no-till and regenerative farming, and they rotate their crops. They do great. They know exactly what their soil health is. Now, if you do rotate, you need to know exactly what you're pulling out of the soil. And the next thing that you plant, you need to know what it has to replenish and know what it's going to put out of the soil, and the continual cycle, because you're always going to be pulling something out of your soil, and you're always going to be putting something back into your soil, whether it be good or bad. But those two things are going to happen, so you're going to need to rotate those crops like that so you know what you need to replace each time. For instance, you can use let's say you use a composting system. You can use food scraps. You can use manure, coffee, eggshells. You can use any of that stuff for compost. Now, you also want earthworms and things like that, because there's different things that you need. Like, for instance, if you just use a lot of coffee, there's nothing wrong with using coffee, but if you use coffee, you have to have something in there like paper shreddings or cardboard for the earthworms to eat, because it will change that soil to where it's not very good for composting. So you have to add, say, cardboard in there, so they have some sort of carbon matter for them to be able to kind of process and things like that. So there's things you have to think about. And then, like I say, you plant crops, rotating. Plant cover crops. Plant a crop that you're not necessarily going to use to eat, but you can grind it up and use it for feed for one of your animals, say for chickens or for cows or for whoever that may be. And honestly, even if you do a cover crop and you don't use it, you might be able to sell it to someone else for feed. If you can tell them exactly, hey, this is what was in my soil, I didn't use any pesticides, anything like that, you might actually be able to use that to sell to someone to actually get a little bit of money to kind of pull back in. And you rotate these plant cover crops. Mainly, it's going to help with their erosion. So you're going to make sure you have a nice, smooth, and maintain your grass level, your dirt health, everything. You just want to really enrich that soil. You want to test, like I say, send your soil off for pH and nutrients. You can adjust it with compost and manure and things like that, different amendments that you can buy. Like I say, send it off to a local, if you have a co-op, farm store that can tell you anything like that, or if you have just a local university that may do those things. I would send it off for sure, that way you know, because even if you have good soil, you want to know that you have good soil, because you don't want to just start planting something and then, oh, everything goes great, fantastic, but I still want to know what's in my soil, just to make sure, because you never know what kind of issue you could have on down the road, especially. And again, I can't stress enough, rotate those crops, because once you do start planting something, like I say, you're going to be removing those nutrients. So you want to rotate those crops so you can avoid depletion of your soil. And mulch garden beds can also retain moisture and suppress weeds. So you can use mulch. There's nothing wrong with that either. If you do like a raised bed, you might want to start with a mulch bed, because that's going to reduce your weeds in the raised bed, so you'll have less issue of that. Water management. You're going to want to look and see what water sources that you have. Wells, municipal supply, rainwater harvesting. There's a lot of different ways you can get water. Runoff from the mountain. I've got a creek that flows through my property right now that actually has runoff from the mountain, and it goes through the creek, and it keeps it, once there's a heavy rain, buddy, that creek is flowing good. So you want to check and see. And you also, once you find out what kind of water you have, you want to maintain some sort of a steady supply. If you have municipal water, fantastic. Then you've got a really reliable source. If you have a well that's been dug, test the well. Make sure the water is still good, because an old well can have some crazy things in it, and an old well could have nothing in it. It could be beautiful water. But you want to make sure that you have really, really good water in that well before you start to drink it or use it for your plants. And I honestly would check with local municipalities, because where I am, we actually have some wells that tie underground to main water supplies and feed them, and then they don't really want you using that well, because it can pull from that water supply and you can have some issues. So I would make sure about that for sure. You want to create irrigation. You're going to have irrigation pretty much no matter what. Even if you go and grab a bucket and go out and water your plants, guess what? That's irrigating your plants. So there's an irrigation system, whether it's hand or whether it's automatic or anything in between. You want to make sure, and you can do this different ways with drip irrigation, rain barrels, ponds. There's all kinds of different ways you can do irrigation. Like I say, even down to just the water pail that you pour out over the plants and done there. And you're also going to want to check too about conserving water in dry areas. There may be some areas that you cannot use certain water at certain times, or that may restrict you to the amount of water that you can use. So you need to be mindful of that and really be sure that you've got enough water to be able to do what you want to do, because the last thing you want to do is rob your animals or your plants of any type of water. And honestly, let's say you have a well, okay? They build the little teepee houses over the top of a well. Use a solar-powered water pump. Pulls the water right up out of the well. That way you're not really using a whole lot of power. And if it's in a remote location, you don't need to run power to it. Do you have to have batteries? Not necessarily. Some of these solar systems now, you can use panels and a really good MPPT charge controller, and it will run it while the sun is out during the day. Now, if you want battery backup, you can use a small battery backup. There's little small solar systems that you can do also. And we'll cover some basics of solar. I'm not going to get really deep into solar because there's so many people that are so much smarter than I am. And I'm no electrician. But I can teach you some of the basic concepts of solar and kind of what you're going to be up against for stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, you can do that for anything there. And now you can also use gray water from sinks and showers to water fruit trees. What is gray water? Gray water is water that comes out of your sinks and your showers, and it is not, so we'll say there's 3 types of water, okay? There's fresh water, there's gray water, there's black water. Fresh water is what you drink out of a garden hose. No harm, no foul. You can buy bottles of it at the store, no big deal. Gray water is what you wash your hands at the sink or wash your body in the shower, and you let that drain off of you, everything there. It's just basically soapy water with some dirt, grime, things that you get off of your body and off of your hands, and that's what is in there. Occasionally there's some, and now you don't want to put grease down in your drain, but occasionally there's some food elements because you've washed a dish or here and there for things like that. Black water is, if you're familiar, right now we're in a camper. This is my office pretty much where I film, where I do everything for the farm and film and different things like that. Black water, we have a black water tank in this camper that's hooked to the toilet. That's pretty much all it handles is black water, which is any type of pee, poop, anything. So that is pretty much, when you go to the bathroom, that is considered black water. That is contaminated, biohazard, whatever it may be, because, I mean, you never know. Some people may have blood in their urine. Some people may have blood in their poop. Different medical conditions have different things. It's just good not to use that at all. But gray water can be those things. Now, you also have to be careful about your gray water. If you know where the gray water comes from, fantastic. You know everything about it. But sometimes people put things down their shower and down their sink that they shouldn't. So please be very careful to research gray water if you do not know where it's coming from for you, in other words. And the easiest way to do a lot, I mean, for implementation, let's just say, you're going to want to calculate your daily needs for your crops and livestock. Now, if you don't have livestock, okay, no problem. You're still going to want to calculate your daily needs, even if you have municipal water, because say you set up a system that has a time delay. For instance, we can set up a system, we'll show you one, I guess probably base it off maybe a 5-gallon bucket. You can set up a time delay where that 5-gallon bucket will automatically water your raised bed. Now, can you hook municipal water to that? Yes. You can hook it up with a float. But also, I want to design it to where if your water goes out, or if you're in one of those places that water is restricted as far as use and how much you can use, then you can use that 5-gallon and know exactly how much you're going to need, how much may evaporate, how much is going to go through, lost in the pipes, pressure, different things like that. You'll be able to find out how much you need, how much you're going to use, so you can plan ahead and have 5, 10, 15, 20, however many gallons you need to be able to get you by in a pinch for a day, a week, a month. You know, some people plan for a year. But you want to be able to plan for those things in case there are outages, or like I say, if you want to do a set it and forget it type thing where you can be gone or be on night shift and sleeping during the day for 3 or 4 days and not be able to touch it. So you need to check for things like that. And if you're going to use rainwater, I would install really good gutters, or if you have gutters, make sure that they're in really good shape, really clean. And there's so many rainwater systems out there to capture and things like that. We'll go over some of those things when we get a little bit more in depth with water and irrigation. I'll show you some of the rain barrels that I have used. I don't use them anymore, and the reason I don't is because I don't have very many crops right now. I have chickens and I have cows, Now, once I finish the house is still under construction. Once I finish that, I'm going to start on the greenhouse and get all kinds of irrigation there. Then I probably will start using the rain barrels again, and I will expand that system greatly, and we'll go over that as well. And use mulching and shade to reduce evaporation of water. Keep things as cool as you can. I know it gets hot here in the south, and it gets hotter in some areas, and it doesn't get as hot in some areas. So you kind of need to see what kind of heat you're going to be up against as far as evaporation. And there's also different ways to do evaporation as far as watering. So if you have issues with evaporation or different things, there's things that you can do to help circumvent a lot of those issues to make sure that your water supplies are really, really accurate. Growing crops, or growing food, or growing vegetables, whatever it may be for you. The big thing, first question you have to answer: what do I want to grow and why? Am I doing it, let's say, market demand, personal consumption? If you are wanting to do for personal consumption, which I honestly would recommend that first, because personal consumption generally is a smaller scale than market demand. That is not always the case, but because it really depends on how much personal consumption you have. They're big families or communal things. There's going to be a lot more personal consumption there, and it's probably going to start to creep up towards those market demands. So you're probably going to really need to decide if you're going to do personal consumption versus market demand, which one's going to be a little bit easier to start. I recommend personal consumption for you, your family, kids, husband, wife, whichever one it is. For your household, I would recommend personal consumption to start out with. That's going to be where you're going to be able to get your pilot programs in and find out really what you want to do, what you enjoy doing, because you want to enjoy this. You don't want this to be a massive burden every day. Yes, it's going to be tough to start and it's going to be tough to do, but you want to be able to get down in the dirt with those things and say, man, this is hard work, but it's a different kind of hard work, and I really enjoy it. So you want to make sure you hone in on really what you want to do. And you want to make sure too, just because you plant something doesn't mean you're necessarily going to eat it. Sometimes you do companion planting for pest control. There's different, for instance, you can plant mint and it will get rid of certain animals. So just the smell of it kind of gets rid of certain animals and different things like that. So, planting something that doesn't necessarily mean you have to consume it. So it could just be for things there. And also make sure you look at what season is good to grow what you want to grow. You don't want to start growing everything in the dead of winter. Some things do okay. A lot of things do not. So you want to make sure that you start in spring, fall-ish, and kind of say, okay, let's see what we have here. And you can start things in winter if you want to. I would recommend starting them inside or in a garage, maybe in small pots or buckets. Just because of the frost lines at different areas, the temperatures can plummet just overnight with no problem there. So you want to make sure that you've got really good conditions that that you can control, that that you can grow things in. For instance, because you want to enjoy this. If you want to grow things, fine. Grow, tomatoes and sell them at a market. But also, if you like tomatoes on a sandwich, grow tomatoes for yourself. There's benefits to both of these, And if you like if your neighbor likes tomatoes, grow tomatoes and sell them to them too, because they get the benefit of having something homegrown. They probably could get it a lot cheaper from you than they can at the store. And if they can't, they're supporting a local farmer. They're supporting a local person that's wanting to grow things to better themselves, better their health, know exactly what they're putting in their body, and maybe even make a little side venture out of it. You never know. There's different ways to do things, And you can, like I say, planting in winter, do it in a garage. Use a greenhouse. There's people that have greenhouses that are heated and cooled. Now, that's probably not going to be the starting point for a lot of people. If it is, awesome. No problem, no harm, no foul, no shame at all. But it's probably not going to be the starting point for a lot of people. Now, you can get up to that point, and like I say, if you want to, hey, I have no qualms at all. That's fantastic. Fantastic. I wish you well with every bit of it. But you want to just make sure that you're able to circumvent any weather issues and really grow. You want to give yourself the best opportunity to be able to grow something, optimal conditions at first, because there's a lot of times you're not going to have optimal conditions, and you're really going to have to tweak your methodologies and things, and you want to know things really well that one small pilot program way. That way you can say, okay, what's failing here? Is it my soil? I can do this with my soil. Is it my water? I can do this with my water. You want to be able, is it my temperature? Is it my light consumption? You want to be able to know something really well so that you can adjust individual parts to suit a specific scenario. And like I say, choose the crops that are suited to your local climate and soil. I recommend just doing the research and finding something that is close to you that you really want to plant in your area, and just go for it. Give yourself the best chance you possibly can to start growing something, because you fail every time until you succeed. And once you succeed, it's a massive morale boost. It really is. Is it hard work? Again, yes it is. But it's for me, it's just so worth it. It's rewarding. You're able to get out and just do these things. And kind of cheat. Start with easy to grow things, excuse me. Lettuce, radishes, beans. Start with something that's really easy to grow. Also, if you want to, you can go organic. Organic's kind of a taboo thing because, if you're growing things in your own backyard and you know all the ingredients and you're not using anything artificial, technically that is organic. Organic has just kind of been a label, but it really needs to be more of a conscious choice not to do things. For instance, like for pesticides, there's certain oils, I think it's called neem oil, that can be good for pesticides. Now, you also need to check your plants and make sure it's not going to harm those, because certain things can interact with certain plants. So I would make sure before you start doing any of those things, I would do some tried and tested things and try to do any type of natural pest controls that you can that's not going to really harm your plants. Let's talk a little bit about livestock and animal husbandry. You want to choose the right animals for your space and your climate. If there's certain things that you want to have as far as animals go, start researching a way to do that. Start researching what you need. Obviously, if you're in the city with a half an acre lot, you're not going to want a cow, because they are going to require probably some of your zoning permits and things. You probably wouldn't be able to have a cow in your backyard. Some places you might if you can. Okay, awesome. You're going to have to start thinking about how to be able to handle manure. You're going to have to think about how to get hay. There's a lot of different things there. Fencing, electric fencing. There's a lot of infrastructure and things as far as that goes. And also any of their shots they may have to have. Any vet visits. There's things, any feed, a specific type of shelter. You always want something for a cow to be able to get out of the weather. So you kind of really need to research a lot of that. Or chickens, you're going to have something. You're going to have them a coop, a run, or somewhere for them to be able to kind of get out. You're going to want to make sure that none of your neighbor's dogs or anything are going to attack them, because I literally had a pack of dogs destroy all of my chicken flock and I had to start all over. So that can't happen. And I'll be honest with you, I've actually had raccoons get into my chicken pen too, and they will kill a chicken. So you have to make sure that you are really conscientious about what you're going to have and be able to control and monitor it really well. And if you have more land, if you have several acres, you can do rotational grazing to improve pasture health. The rotational grazing is good for cows. Now, if you free-range chickens with cows, that's fantastic, because the chickens will actually eat all of the flies and larvae and things like that in the cow manure and in the field, so it will reduce the flies that are on the backs of your cows, because cows do get flies, especially in the summertime. So it makes it a little bit easier to kind of help manage some of those pest control issues that you have with certain animals. You can raise, for instance, raise ducks and have eggs, but also have pest control in your garden. Ducks, chickens, a lot of that will eat bugs out of a garden and it will eat weeds out of a garden, but they a lot of times will not eat any of the vegetables. Sometimes they will, so you have to kind of be careful with what you see. You may want to test it out a little bit, but a lot of times they go after the weeds and the bugs, which honestly saves you on pesticides. And when they go in there after the weeds and the bugs, then you have chicken litter that gets in there. It even helps your soil. So there's a lot of benefits as far as that goes. And if, say you have chickens and you really want to do something to help a certain area of soil, you can build something called a chicken tractor. Basically, it's a big box, I guess you'd call it. It's not really a box, but it's a big box that you put chickens in. Has a simple one is a big square box that's probably, I don't know, 1.5 by 1.5, and then probably 6 foot long. Put a wheel on the front of it and put handles on the back. Pick it up like a wheelbarrow, and you'll be able to move it and set it down. The chickens can graze all over the bugs, everything on the grass there, and then you can take and move it again, and as they eat and they let out chicken litter, it goes onto the grass, helps to fertilize. So if you have some soil that really needs some help, chicken tractors can help. And honestly, you can make an entire coop a tractor. There's people that have entire coops that are on wheels that they move from time to time each day, or they have little nylon bottoms. That way they can just take a tractor and just push it, and they move it 10 feet, however much they want to move it each day, and it helps to get a lot of the bugs and get the chicken litter on the ground and make sure that it kind of helps to replenish the soil as far as that goes. You're going to want to, again, make sure you have shelters to protect your animals. You have to watch out for the predators. Like I said, with the chickens, there's a lot of predators that would come after, especially like hawks. They will come after and they will harm and kill chickens. They really will. And research local feed sources too, because you don't want to start getting heavy into a certain type of animal like a duck or things like that and have a hard time finding feed, because you're gonna probably want to buy some store-bought feed at some point in time. It's not ideal, but I bought, now I won't say store-bought, but I'll buy feed. We have a local feed guy that actually grows his own, but you're going to want to buy feed to some degree. So may not be store-bought. Even if it's grown by somebody else, you're going to want to make sure you actually have access and be able to do that. And I'll be honest with you, I would call and talk with your local veterinarian. Some places don't have a vet that can come out to your farm. If you have bigger animals such as cows, that can be really difficult. Because sometimes stuff happens to a cow, have to have hoof trimmed or have to have antibiotic shots if you don't want to do that. If you're giving birth and you have an issue, there's different things that you have to just be very careful with, and you really need a good relationship with a local veterinarian. Someone just to fall back on. Even if you feel very comfortable with doing these things, sometimes there's things you're going to see that you're just some prolapse on cows or things that you're just going to have a lot of questions about, and you always want to have that, you're always going to want to have that in your back pocket to be able to kind of fall back on that, because there's going to be questions that you're going to want to ask, and you're not going to be able to find a lot of the answers that you need, and if you do, you don't really know to trust them, because is it true, is it not true? So I always recommend finding a really good veterinarian and just having a good relationship to be able to talk to them. Alright, let's look at some equipment and tools. You're going to have essential tools that are going to be your hand tools, your tiller, irrigation systems, yes, that's a tool, and tractors. I mean, just because you're in the city and everything, you may not want a tractor, but if you start to expand to a point, you get a few acres, you may want one. And what we'll do too is we'll do a separate little video on just some basic tractor maintenance and things to kind of look out for. What to look for on a tractor, what you're wanting to do at your place. So we'll do a separate video series probably on just tractor information. And with these tools, you're going to want to probably either look at buying new versus secondhand. I've bought used tractors. I bought a lot of used hand tools, used electric tools. I mean, you can buy a lot of things secondhand and save some money, but there's some things that you get secondhand that are not necessarily great. Like, for instance, I bought a hay ring for my cows. I bought it very cheap. It was actually a horse hay ring, but it was a hay ring that got me by. I bought it very, very cheap. It had some issues with rust I really wasn't 100% aware of, and it got me by till I got a brand new hay ring. Just because I was trying to find a good deal on one, make sure I didn't spend a bunch of money on a hay ring, because cows can destroy one. And sure enough, the hay ring that I bought, pretty cheap, they destroyed, broke the side off of it. So you have to be very careful what you're spending money on. Like I said, I got it for a very good price, so I didn't have to really worry about as far as like wasting a lot of money, because I probably could re-weld it back up. But you have to just kind of weigh your pros and cons as far as buying new and used equipment. And there's some do-it-yourself alternatives. You know, you can make certain tools out of PVC for planting. You can do certain things. You know, a lot of people have those, take a railroad tie with some fencing behind it and make a drag for a field and make it where it's very smooth. You know, there's things that you can do and make your own tools for certain jobs that are really efficient. And, I mean, you really want to just step back and say, okay, is this in really good shape versus not good shape? Because you don't want to be burned on something. Now, is it something like you need something right now and you can't physically get it at a store? You may not necessarily have as much of a choice. You really want to be very careful and very cautious in those situations. Truthfully, I would recommend, my recommendation is invest in high quality tools that save you time, because they're also going to save you labor. Because if you buy a tool secondhand, first time you use it, it breaks, you got to go buy a brand new one anyhow. So now you've wasted a little bit more money, you've wasted more time, and you're having to work and do the job again because it broke the first time. So I would say get really good quality things. Now you can get good quality things secondhand. Again, you have to just be very careful and very cautious in what you buy and what you look for. And maintain your tools. You know, oil things that need to be oiled. Use grease on things that need to have grease or grease fittings. Do regular maintenance on your tractors and your tillers, and you know, don't leave gas in a generator or something over the winter when you don't use it, because you come back the next time, then you've got all kind of carburetor issues, fuel line issues. Just take care of things the best you can to make sure that they last, because you don't really want to spend money when you don't have to, because homesteading has enough things that you're going to spend money on, or going to want to spend money on in itself, and you don't want to have to spend money on equipment that you didn't necessarily have to. And there's some machinery that you're going to want to use, it may not be worth buying. You may just want to rent it. If you're putting up fence around a perimeter, theoretically, you're only going to put up perimeter fence once. So you can actually rent fence drive or post driving attachments for a tractor and use those things the one time, take them back to the rental store. You theoretically wouldn't need it anymore. If you have to do any other fencing, it's probably going to be minor in comparison to that. So you would be able to do it likely with your tractor, or rent the piece of equipment again and, you know, plan everything out that you're wanting to do, rent the piece of equipment again, and say, okay, I've got it for a week. I'm going to do this on Monday, this on Tuesday, you know, work whatever days, this on Saturday. You know, plan things out. That way you've got a really good idea of what you're going to be using it for. You're not going to waste a lot of money, and you're going to have the most bang for your buck out of a lot of those pieces of machinery. We'll talk a little bit about food preservation and storage. Excuse me. We'll just kind of touch on this a little bit, because a lot of people may not do it. We'll go really in depth in it in a later time, in a later course, once we get a little bit further down the road with the homesteading thing. You got a lot of methods. You got canning, freezing, dehydrating, fermenting. A lot of people want to use those little vacuum seal things. Those are great for portion size, things like that. And a lot of people canning. My grandmother canned. I would love to get back into it personally, but I just haven't done it yet. Mainly when I get the house done and get my pantry going, then I'd love to do that. But there's different things that you can do for saving food and longer terms, for longer times, excuse me. And there's also root cellars for long-term storage. You know, a lot of people, they don't really use them very much. Well, not around me, but they still are utilized pretty well. Root cellars, no electricity. They kind of bury them in the ground, and you're able to store food for a long time. and keep things sealed up fairly well, climate controlled. You can moisture control. You can do a lot of things with a root cellar, especially if you don't have power and you really want a way to be able to save food right off the bat, right from the get-go. That is a very good alternative to doing there. And when you preserve your food and you can it, you reduce waste. So say you grew way too much of something, can it or freeze it, dehydrate, whatever you got to do, you can preserve it and use it later. That's the beautiful thing about homesteading is, you don't have to use everything that you grow right then. And I'll be honest with you, if you grow too much of something and you have a neighbor that grows too much of something else, barter. There's nothing to be said about trading. Hey, I've grew a bunch of extra tomatoes. Well, your neighbor grew a bunch of extra lettuce. Hey, I'll trade you tomatoes for lettuce. Oh, great. We can all come over and have hamburgers. You've got different things you can, and you get with a lot of other people too. Farming is a community. Anything you grow is a community. You get with your neighbors that do it. You could literally swap up things. You have all kind of vegetables. You hone in on one thing, they hone in on something else. You have all kinds of options to be able to really, really get quality vegetables and a diverse type of vegetable too, without trying to grow everything that you need. Start small batches when you do preserve foods also. You want to get just like your growing techniques, you want to get your preservation techniques down pat. Again, you can always scale up. It's difficult scaling down. Scaling down to me is a mental thing also. If you scale up, hey, I'm growing. If you scale down, oh man, I wasn't able to do that. So it's a good thing for mental growth as well, and mental health. You can always scale up, but it really works on you when you have to scale down. So try to remember that with pretty much everything that you do here. So, and you want to learn, the reason you want to do the small batches is you want to learn your proper canning techniques. It's harder to learn canning techniques when you're trying to can 30 cans, but it's a lot easier to know your techniques when you're trying to do 3. So the size really helps you to be able to hone in on your craft and make sure you really have a good idea and you're doing it correctly and something doesn't go bad. And you also have to think about storage with these things too. You're going to want to have long-term storage, so a pantry, root cellar, somewhere that's fairly climate controlled. I would say well climate controlled actually. You're just going to want to have to think about, storage and space where you're wanting to put these things. You have to just kind of make sure that you've got the proper space and proper organization to be able to store whatever you want to store. All right, let's talk about homestead income and business strategies. Again, we won't get really in depth, but I'm going to give you an overview on kind of what you expect, what's out there, just to kind of, excuse me, so you know what to see, what you're going to see. Diversified income streams, farmers market, online sales, farm tours. A lot of this stuff is going to be down the road. It's not going to be immediate, unless you go out and buy a turnkey farm business. It's not going to be something you're going to want to do right now. But be thinking about it. Always be thinking about it. From the time you first do it, if you're really into it, be thinking about, okay, what can I do to sell things online or to farmers market or to do different things or tours. You could have a small little area if you have a big enough farm that you could support camping overnight with campers. There's different things you can do as far as that goes. And when you do that, you're going to want to think branding and marketing a small farm business, like forming an LLC, sole proprietorship, different things like that. Once you get into this, I honestly recommend you get a farm accountant or someone that has dealt with farms. And honestly, what you can usually do in a lot of those cases is, I called my neighbor. He's got a lot of acres and a good bit of cattle. He told me the name of his accountant that he uses for farming, and I give him a call. So you can find out from other farmers. They'll tell you a good accountant. Some of them may not give you information. If they don't, that's fine. Just pick another farm around the area and give them a call. They should be able, but they can handle things and show you how to set up if you're going to do farm business, LLC, and different things like that. Because once you do that, once you start looking at that, there may be options for grants, loans, funding options for small farms. There's different things that you're going to want to try to pursue, possibly, and to have an accountant that can work on your behalf and get you information and legal information that you need is really, really worth it. Because the last thing you want to do is do something incorrectly, unknowingly, and then have to pay some sort of penalty or tax penalty or something like that for it. So I would recommend getting you a really good farming accountant or one that's familiar with farms. And there's going to be a lot of things you're going to want to look into as far as implementation, like researching farm products in your area. Some places, homemade soap may go over great. Fantastic. You can sell homemade soap. Some places, homemade soap does not go over well. Some places, vegetables go over good. Some places, certain vegetables just don't go over good because they're flooded the market. So you need to research and kind of see what you want to do. And the world we have now, honestly, social media can be great for this. You can set up a website or a social media presence for marketing. And even if you don't sell anything, go ahead and set you up a social media site for your farm. Start taking pictures of how you build things and how you do different things like that. I've got one. It's difficult for you. It's kind of difficult to maintain right now, but I've got one, Green Creek Farms. And that's my YouTube channel, but I've got a Facebook page that I don't do a lot on, and I don't post a lot on Instagram, mainly because we've been doing a lot of infrastructure here lately, and I just haven't had a lot of time to post things. But I do post a lot of different things, a lot of progress that we've made like that. But it's not to sell anything right now. It's just getting the brand name out there. So I would recommend that, because if people get used to your brand name a little bit, then that's going to start be more on their mind. And then when you start to sell things, you're going to be like, hey, I've seen that brand before. I've heard of that place before. So it's going to be in the back of their mind. It's going to be something that you can kind of build on later if you want to. And like I say, when you get to this point too, there's grant options and there's farm loans. You can do different things. There's farm credit unions that loan with, they do barn dominium loans, which is what I'm building right now. They'll do land loans. They'll do equipment loans, cattle loans. There's all kinds of loans out there and grants that you can get to help you really build up a small farm if that's truthfully what you want to do. Talk a little bit about self-sufficiency and sustainability. Wow, can't hardly say that word. Off-grid living, solar power, rainwater, composting toilets. If that's what you want to do, awesome. There's some areas that you have more difficulty than others. Some power companies will charge you to use solar. They'll charge you to use your own solar for power. I don't know how that works. I don't really like it, but there's some places that you actually have to pay to use solar, so be mindful of that. And also, like I say, local municipalities, make sure you can collect rainwater legally. Some places it's not legal. Some places all you can do is divert water. And composting toilets. Composting toilets are good toilets. Sometimes there is an odor associated with them if you don't get a good composting toilet or if you have issues with them. So keep in mind that that's going to be a continual maintenance thing. It's going to be more upkeep than your average toilet. So I would just say use caution and do a lot of research with those things. And the nice thing with a lot of this is nice too, even if you don't want to live off grid. Sustainability, making your own products, cleaners, candles, soaps, all kinds of different things. And the biggest thing is making your own food. My chickens, I have eggs, and that's fantastic right now. That's awesome. With the cows, hopefully I'll have beef. So the more you can make for yourself, are you going to save tons and tons of money? Maybe not, but you're going to have massive quality control. You're going to know exactly what's going into your soap. You're going to know exactly what's going into your cleaning products, which in turn could go into your mouth. because if you're cleaning off a counter bar and you can make food, so I'm just saying you really have a lot of quality control when it comes to those things, especially vegetables and food and things like that. And you're trying to you're reducing your reliance on external resources also. If you can do something to be able to grow your own food, and then you start having issues. I know all the time there's a Listeria outbreak or an E. coli outbreak or some sort of an outbreak that they have to pull a whole line of chicken off the shelf, or a whole line of beef off the shelf, or a whole line of canned goods off the shelf. But if you're growing your own and you have your own way of doing it, you have your own, locked in quality control process, I can't see anything that's bad about that, because you're reducing market strain, number one, because you're not buying from the market, so it's more for someone else. But again, quality control. You're making your own food, so you know exactly what's going into it. You know exactly where it was grown, exactly what kind of chemicals were in the soil, exactly what kind of pH the soil was. I mean, you're going to know the name of the farmer, even. I mean, you're going to have a lot of quality issues that you won't have to worry about necessarily, as long as you maintain your tight quality control and use ingredients that you know. So the more you can grow, the more you can know. So start with small energy saving habits. Is probably the first thing I would recommend on this. LED lights, for instance. Passive solar heating. It's not necessarily an option for some people, but I recommend little things. Upgrade the windows on your house if they're older. Make sure you have thicker glass panes, double pane windows even. Make sure there's no air leaks around anything. Make sure your heating and air systems are well serviced. Make sure you're changing out those filters all the time. There's little efficiency things that you can use, that you can do too. Making sure your water heater is well maintained and you're not having any issues with buildup in that. And if it's time for a new one, there's a lot of energy efficient ones out there. So just start with little small steps like that to be more conscientious. If you can you probably will save a little bit of money doing those things. And from there, just kind of build on that. Just kind of increase, your knowledge of those different things. So that's always good. And by doing this too, you're going to learn basic skills. You're going to learn soap making, natural dyeing of things. You're going to learn how to grow something out of the dirt. You're going to learn how to take care of an animal that can't really offer you anything else back, but with cows, it's life. Or with chickens, eggs, or if you choose to slaughter chickens, take them to the butcher. You're going to learn how to care for something that can't really repay you as far as monetary value, but they can repay you with food or with something else. So you're going to learn skills to be able to care for these things, to be able to carry this with you, not just in farming, but in life. Give you more appreciation for things. And honestly, to me, whenever I see, a deer or something on the side of the road, I get a little bit more respect for it, because I know exactly what it is for an animal to die. I know exactly what it is if they lose their life for no purpose. It's sad, but if they lose their life so that others can live, fantastic. That's the circle of life, in other words. So, and this is not going to be instantaneous. You're going to want to gradually do these things. Gradually learn something new. Gradually do the energy efficiency stuff. You're going to want to do this really slow, because if you do it too fast, you're going to overshoot it. You're going to get burned out, and you're going to just completely stop. Do these things real slow. That way you're not burning yourself out and you're not jumping too hard into something that you're just not quite sure about. You just want to make sure, you want to ensure that this is the thing for you. This is something you want to do and something that you want to pursue. Community and networking. This is the best part about local farms, growing your own food, finding other people that do. To me, this is the best part, because this, to me, is how society was meant to be. Now, not everybody living on the same piece of land and, houses right next to each other. If you want to do that, fantastic. You can have a shire, whatever you want to call it. There's nothing wrong with that. But being a community, knowing your neighbor, being able to help your neighbor, to me, that's how society should be. And you're going to want, when you're in this, doing these things like this, find mentors. Find people that are around you that you can pull off of. Find local farm groups. Get on Facebook or Instagram, any of those things. Jump onto those local farm groups and start asking some questions. There's a lot of people on there. I mean, there's some people that can be jerks, I'm going to be honest with you. But there's a lot of good-hearted people on there also. And there's a lot of people that'll shut up the jerks. They'll say, hey, they're asking legitimate questions. They just want to know. So drown out all the bad ones, all the negativity, and try to start honing in on some positive ones if you ever do join in those groups. Or there may be local farm groups that just gather. Sometimes they gather at like a local breakfast area or something like that. Just go sit around with a bunch of older farmers and talk to them and ask them questions, Participate in workshops and in training. I mean, sometimes they offer, you may have to go off for some of these because some of these are in bigger areas, maybe more metropolitan areas where they have a venue where you can actually participate or seat a lot of people in these things. I know one for a fact that sticks out in my mind because the man is amazing. He has great information that he gives out. His name's Joel Salatin. YouTube channel is Farm Like a Lunatic, I think it is. Fantastic knowledge. He's where I've gotten a lot of my information from over the years. I've kind of honed in different little things here and there, but he gives really good information about a lot of things. It's really worth checking him out. But he also does workshops. There's all kinds of things you can do. And you're going to want to engage in your community, and because your community is going to be your customers. So start getting involved with some things. Get informed with Future Farmers of America. Get involved with your local ag programs at high schools and different things like that. Just try to see if there's things you can get involved there to really, really immerse yourself in the culture, because it really is that. It's a community, but it is a culture, and everybody wants to see you succeed in this culture. The ones of us that truthfully do it, that want to do it, really want to see everyone they can succeed in it. That's the big thing. You want to see everybody succeed in it. Attend local farm meetups, and if you can do it, get into a farm tour. If there's any farms around you, see if they offer tours or workshops, Biggest thing is you just want to network with other farmers. You really want to get in with other people that are like-minded. Even if you're not, say you're not going to have acres, say you just have a half acre, you still want to get in with someone that is farming-minded, because that's really something that you want to immerse yourself with, because you're going to want to do a lot of those things. And a lot of those things that they do are massive scale, huge scale, but you can scale those down to where they're useful for you. So they may grow some crop on 100 acres, but one of the processes that they use, you might find useful in your 6-foot by 8-foot garden bed at home, and you may implement that. It may save you a lot of time, may save you a lot of money, and may increase your yield. You never know until you find out what all is out there and what all is offered in all of these things. So encourage you, please get out and talk with a farmer.